Hello, my name is Dr. Kevin Mercado. I'm here from Monrovia High School Sports Medicine Program. This is a video to help the students and viewers understand the demonstration or understand the content pertaining to muscles, origins, insertions, and actions, primarily specifically pertaining to the quadricep muscle and the hamstring muscle group. What I've done for the purposes of this demonstration is I've used this basically stretchy tape to mimic the muscle. And that instead of using all four quadricep or all four muscles of the quadricep, I'm just utilizing the rectus femoris muscle as one muscle to demonstrate. And then I've used the bicep femoris muscle, both the short head and the long head, in order to help the instructional purposes. So, go back a little bit more here. So I also have a couple models. All right. So the first model has the muscles. The second muscle. Actually, I'm going to use this just to show you what the origin and insertion is. And then this third model also I'm going to utilize as well for your instructional benefit. So what I want to make sure that you are able to visualize is the origins, insertions, and actions of these particular muscles. So I'm going to start off with the quadricep. Okay, so the quadricep, you can't see the actual origin and insertions as it lays supine on the table, the skeleton. So what I'm going to point to is the origin of the quadricep or the rectus femoris actually is the anterior inferior iliac spine of the pelvis. Okay, it transitions all the way down and it inserts onto the tibial tuberosity of the tibia. Okay, so what we're going to do is show you flexion and extension and how the quadricep contributes to flexion of the hip and extension of the knee. So where the quadricep, when it contracts like so. Okay, so we have one contraction, but it doesn't just contract at one particular part of the muscle. It actually contracts like this, hundreds, thousands, millions of different areas. So when you have all of these small little contractions contributing to an entire muscle, you're going to end up getting movement. So I'll demonstrate how that works. So again, remember the quadricep flexes the hip and it extends the knee. So it does this motion, flexes the hip and also extends the knee. So if I were to contract one and then another one and then a third and then continue to contract it, you'll see that the extension of the knee occurs. And if I continue to pull, right, so flexion of the hip also occurs. So we get this motion of flexion at the hip and extension of the knee with constant small contractions all over the muscle. Now, as we get this contraction of the quadricep, if we remember that flexion of the hip occurs, so again, if we go to the origin of the rectus femoris, which is the anterior inferior iliac spine, which is obviously here as well, as I just pointed to, and then we have this model here that provides us with understanding that the muscle does travel down. It does travel down from the anterior inferior iliac spine and travels all the way down until it gets to this point. We end up with a muscle that has a lot of pull. And so when we have that pull, we're also going to end up with some movement that occurs at the hamstring. So let's create that flexion, as I just said, but we're not going to create the extension of the knee. So here's the flexion of the hip, okay? And so this is us stretching the hamstring. So now, as I said before, flexion of the hip occurs, right? So the quadricep contracts. It can flex the hip, and we're not doing any extension of the knee at this point. Okay, so here we have a position as indicated with the knee inflection and the hip inflection. This is a position of stretching the hamstring. Now, when we extend the knee, the hamstring also has to stretch. So what I want to show you first is that with flexion of the hip and extension of the knee, we get a very, if we just look here at the quadricep, we get a very slacked muscle compared to here, which is, it's much more taut. So if we look at the quadricep muscle, it's not in a stretched position. It's actually contracting. So when we get full extension, you can see, let's just say we are not in extension yet for the other knee. There is quite a bit of space here, if you can see this. There's a little bit of space here between the muscle and the femur. Now, that's not necessarily how it is in a true anatomy. There's a lot of connective tissue and all that, but for demonstration purposes, it's very important for me to tell you that. So, but when I extend the knee, watch the space that occurs between the quadricep and the femur. There's quite a bit more space that is now between the muscle and the femur here, and the bone. Okay, so this is a fully extended knee. So when I flex the knee, now the hamstring has to do more work. Okay, it's going to do more work. It's going to contract to flex the knee. Now we can again see here between the femur and the quadricep, the space now decreases compared to extension of the knee. So extension of the knee, it's pretty slack. It's not very taut. Okay, I can basically move it in and out. It's very easy. But as I flex the knee, the quadricep now has to stretch. And as I continue to flex the knee more, and I bring the heel to the glute, you'll find that this quadricep space in between the bone and the bone here and the muscle, it's actually less space than before. So now we have a very, very tight space. There's not a lot of gap in between, because this muscle now is on a full stretch. It's very taut. But as the muscle extends the knee, it's no longer on a stretch. Okay? Now, there's quite a bit of space between the quadricep and the femur. And it's actually much more taut compared to when the knee is flexed all the way. Now, it's much different compared to now, right? Much difference in its slacking ability compared to it being here. It's much more taut. So, again, if we were to flip this skeleton or flip the individual over on its stomach, right, and then we were to stretch the quadricep, it would be very similar in this position with regards to flexion of the knee. So, that being said, again, we look at the origin here, right, which is the anterior inferior iliac spine. If we go back to here, same position, anterior inferior iliac spine. That's in black. Here, tibial tuberosity. This is the insertion point of the quadricep, and specifically here for this class, this video demonstration of the rectus femoris. So rectus femoris, anterior inferior iliac spine, origin, insertion, tibial tuberosity. Again, going to the skeleton, the model that's standing up, anterior inferior iliac spine, which is the origin, insertion, tibial tuberosity. Now, if I were to take this particular leg, right, and now I were to, let's focus on the hamstring now, and I were to flex the knee and flex the hip. So it's flexion of the hip. So the quadricep pulls, flexes the hip, and actually even a more pull if I want to, even a stronger contraction, more of these muscles squeezing together, it's going to extend the knee. So we talked about the slack of the quadricep and then the tautness of the quadricep with full knee flexion. Now I want to show you a few things here. So with regards to knee flexion, when we stretch the hamstring, this is actually considered a stretch of the hamstring. Now remember, we go origin of the hamstring is the ischial tuberosity. See if I can slide it back just a little bit more so you can see. Origin of the hamstring in black, ischial tuberosity. Okay, the insertion, I've only used the biceps femoris muscle. I did not use the semitendinosus, semimembranosus because that's on the medial side and it's very kind of difficult to see. So for the purposes of this demonstration, just like I use only one muscle, I'm going to use the biceps femoris, but I'm using the long head and I'm using the short head. Long head is origin is the ischial tuberosity, and the also insertion point is on the fibula and the lateral portion of the tibia. So the short head obviously has its origin on the femur. Remember, it doesn't cross two joints. It actually only crosses one joint. And the insertion is also on it crosses the knee and it attaches and inserts onto the fibula. So when we extend the knee, now what I've done is I've placed some colors on here. Okay, so your black origin ischial tuberosity, your insertion is here, but what I've done is I've put some tape in order to allow you to see the tape. I put some tape and colored it in order to allow you to see how the muscle stretches and how part of the muscle, it will move from one position to another. The insertion, the origin of the short head of the biceps femoris is on the femur, indicated in red. The insertion is also across the knee and also on the lateral surface, right, of the upper leg on the fibula. But the black is supposed to be similar to its insertion point, or an area where I want you to see how the black moves as well, so you can see how the muscle stretches. So if we were to stretch this individual, it's a real life human, and we have them in knee flexion. This is a stretch that would be good for somebody who can't get to here and can't even get to here. Remember, some people, they can get to 90 degrees of hip flexion, so they can get to a full 90, right, of hip flexion and the extension, and it's a comfortable stretch. Some people, soccer players in particular, I talked about previous videos, can get to here. Some they can only get to here, right? A lot of times they can get to about here, and that's it. Well, we can stretch them by flexing the knee and getting their hip to 90, and that's still considered a good hamstring stretch. Okay, so let's just take, for example, we're stretching a very inflexible individual with very tight hamstrings in this position. We want to eventually get them to this position. So what I'm going to show you here is just how the hamstring actually stretches, just like I did with the quadricep, and show that to you by indicating the purple and the black and how they move. And I'm going to also use a tape measure to indicate what the difference is in measurement in distance. So as this quadricep contracts, so So we're going to pull the quadriceps, it's going to contract. You'll be able to see the blue. This is the long head. You'll see the blue move from just over my, like right where my shoulder is. And now it's not even close to my shoulder. It's much more superior to my shoulder, right? So again, we start here at 90. The quadricep contracts to extend the knee. The hamstring is going to stretch. It's going to have to stretch in order to allow the quadricep to perform its action of extension of the knee. So the black, you can see, is just superior to my arm. Now, if I extend the knee, that black part of the short head, it kind of merges with the blue. Here it is, right here. Okay? It's much higher from my shoulder, which is here where the pin is at, to the bottom portion of the black. It's a big difference, right? So that hamstring does move. It does elongate, right? It gets much longer. So if we were to take a measurement, and from the beginning of the purple colored tape, it's about to the origin, it's about 12 and a half inches. But as I extend it, it goes from, it's now at 19 inches, and it went from 3, which this is 3, still at the top, okay, still at the top of the purple, to 19 inches here, which you can't see because I know it's a little bit close, or 18, sorry, 18. From 3 to 18, 18 minus 3 is 15 inches. So basically we went from 12 inches to 15 inches, or to 15 inches, which is a 3-inch difference in length from the top of the purple tape to the origin. So it's a big difference in stretch. And then even if we were to do a measurement from the insertion, which is here, to the origin, and we started off at, again, 12 and a half inches, and we did, and then we now it's at 18 inches, okay, so it went from 12 and a half to 18, so basically it's about a 5.5 inch difference in the length of the tape from its insertion to the tape from its origin. And again, if we relate the tape to the muscle, from the muscle's insertion to the muscle's origin, it's a much longer stretch and a much longer muscle, which means that muscle has to stretch, which it does do. You can see the stretch of the muscle occur, right, of the long head. The short head is very similar. Okay, so the short head, we're going from zero, top of the black, to top of the red, and we extend it. So sorry, let me give you the dimensions. 8 inches. And now it's about 11 and a half inches. So it went from 8 inches from the insertion to 11 and a half inches to the origin, from flexion of the knee to extension of the knee. So that's about 3.5 inches from its origin. From its origin to the insertion point, which we basically create the insertion point, which is right at the top of the black where it's inserted. So it's another, again, big difference, a few inches of change in length from the insertion to the origin. So this muscle does an absolute, this muscle absolutely stretches and lengthens in order for the quadriceps to be able to perform its action of extension of the knee. So we have a very, very, very good stretch of the hamstring, both the biceps femoris, and then a very, very, very good contraction of the quadriceps. So when you end up with knee flexion and we go into knee extension, your insertion points and your origins are very important to understand how the effectiveness of the stretch occurs with regards to the muscle movement. So the stretch has to occur, and I just wanted to make sure to indicate to you what the stretch looks like with regards to the hamstring muscles in relation to here. So again, you'll see quite a bit of slack, right? Quite a bit of slack. Again, like I did on the quadricep, there's some space here between the femur and the short head. Quite a bit of space here. Space here between the long head and the femur. And as we extend the knee, you get much less space here between the short head and the femur, and much less space here between the long head and the femur as well. So you get this increased slack, similar to I showed you on the quadricep. Well, quadricep increased slack with its movement, right, of flexion of the hip and extension of the knee. You get increased slack when it's not stretched. It's performing its motion here, right? So if we get a pull, again, the hamstrings are going to work together. They're going to pull on this lower leg to flex the knee. And they're going to keep pulling until they can't pull anymore. And then as they pull, this quadricep has to stretch and become flexible. So when you get this pull, look at how much motion there is, or how much slack there is, space. And then when we get the quadricep to pull and extend the knee, now you have much less space between, again, the short head and the femur, and the long head and the femur as well. And you can really tell the difference between in the space and the slack of the muscle compared to when it stretches completely. Now you have, it lengthens, as I indicated before with the measurements, and now you have very little space for the video demonstration between the muscle and the short head and the femur, and then the long head here, and the femur as well. So that gives you, I hope that gives you a better understanding on how the muscles move with regards to the quadricep and the hamstring. So that completes my video demonstration of the muscles, origins, insertions, and actions of the hamstring and the quadricep and how they interact.